They mocked me at my brother's wedding, but I secretly owned the catering business and I canceled their meal service. I've always believed in building something for myself, and that's exactly what I did when I started my catering business. What began as a small food truck during my college years gradually evolved into a full-service catering company, now employing over 50 people and serving high-end events all across Los Angeles. It wasn't easy. I sacrificed sleep, missed out on vacations, and spent years reinvesting every dollar I made. But after nearly a decade of hard work, I built something I could truly be proud of. Unfortunately, my family never saw it that way. My relationship with them had been strained for years. My mother passed away when I was 14, and within a year, my father remarried a woman named Linda. She was controlling, manipulative, and from the moment she entered our lives, it was clear she wanted to erase any trace of my mother. My father, eager to move on, let it happen. Family pictures of my mom disappeared. Her belongings were either put away or accidentally thrown out, and any mention of her was met with uncomfortable silence. It was as if she had never existed. Linda made sure she was the new center of our family. My younger brother, Jake, who was 10 at the time, was too young to notice the shift. He grew close to her while I felt like an outsider in my own home. Over time, my father became less and less involved in my life, spending all of his time with Linda and Jake. I tried to hold on to the bond we once had, but it became clear that I was no longer a priority. The real breaking point came when I was in college. Unlike Jake, who was sent to an expensive private university on my father's dime, I was told to figure it out on my own. My father refused to help, claiming I needed to learn responsibility. So I worked multiple part-time jobs to support myself, bartending, waiting tables, and running my food truck whenever I had a free moment. Linda never missed an opportunity to mock my efforts, calling it my little food truck hobby, while praising Jake's real career in finance. Despite everything, I still try to be part of the family. I would come home for holidays, though I was always treated like a guest rather than a son. But 6 years ago, my father did something that made me walk away for good. He sold our childhood home, the house my mother had decorated, the place where all my memories of her lived, without even telling me. I only found out when I came home for a visit and discovered that they had already moved. Worse, all of my mother's remaining belongings, things I had wanted to keep, were gone. When I confronted my father about it, he dismissed my concerns, telling me I was too emotional and needed to move on. That was the last time I spoke to him. I cut ties with my father, Linda, and even Jake. I didn't want anything to do with a family that saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. I focused on my business, put all my energy into making it grow, and built the life I wanted without them. For 6 years, I heard nothing from them, and I was perfectly fine with that. At least, until last month, when an unexpected invitation arrived in my mailbox. After 6 years of silence, I thought I had left my family behind for good. I had built a successful business, created a life on my own terms, and surrounded myself with people who actually respected me. But then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was for my younger brother Jake's wedding. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, some generic invitation sent out to distant family members. But when I opened the envelope, I found a handwritten note from Jake himself. In it, he wrote that he missed me, that he regretted how things had gone between us, and that he wanted to reconnect. He admitted that our family situation had always been complicated, but he hoped I would put the past aside, at least for his wedding day. I won't lie, I was skeptical. I had spent years convincing myself that I didn't need my family, and now, suddenly, Jake wanted me back in his life. Still, a part of me wanted to believe that he was being sincere. After all, my issues had always been with my father and Linda, not with Jake. Maybe he really did want to fix things between us. After a lot of thought, I decided to give him a chance. I RSVP'd yes, wanted to show good faith. I even reached out to Jake and offered to provide the catering for the wedding. Given the scale of my business now, I could have done it at cost, giving him a luxury service for a fraction of the price. But Jake politely declined, saying they had already booked another company. That stung a little. It wasn't about the money, it was about the gesture. If he truly wanted to reconnect, wouldn't accepting my help have been a meaningful step? Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just logistics. Maybe he didn't want to mix business with family. Either way, I was willing to set my doubts aside and see if we could rebuild our relationship. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a disaster. The wedding was held at a stunning venue, one of those high-end estates with sprawling gardens, chandeliers in every room, and waitstaff dressed better than some of the guests. As I arrived, I told myself that no matter what happened, I would keep things civil. I wasn't expecting a warm welcome from everyone, but I was hoping, at the very least, to have a pleasant evening celebrating my brother's big day. To my surprise, Jake was genuinely happy to see me. His hug felt sincere, and for a moment, I thought that maybe, just maybe, this night wouldn't be as bad as I feared. But that feeling didn't last long. The moment my stepmother Linda spotted me, she smirked and made a snide remark about how surprised she was to see me in something that wasn't a food truck uniform. I bit my tongue, forcing a polite smile. I knew better than to take the bait, but it was clear she hadn't changed one bit. Then my father found me, and that's when things really fell apart. I could tell from the way he stumbled over that he had been drinking. At first, I thought he would ignore me altogether. Instead, he stopped right in front of me, looked me up and down, and sneered. "Who invited you?" He slurred loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear. I pulled the invitation from my pocket, keeping my voice calm. "Jake did." That set him off. He went on a drunken tirade about how I had disgraced the family, how I was a nobody playing pretend with my little catering business, and how I had no right to be there. Linda, of course, chimed in with her signature passive-aggressive sarcasm. "Oh, don't be too hard on him, dear. Maybe one day he'll finally make something of himself and afford a suit that actually fits." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I refused to give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, I simply turned and walked away. I had no intention of spending another minute in that place. I came hoping to reconnect with my brother, but it was clear nothing had changed. This wasn't my family anymore. As I walked toward the exit, shaking off the humiliation from my father and stepmother, something caught my eye, familiar faces among the catering staff setting up for the main course. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. After all, my company had over 50 employees, and we handled multiple events across the city. But as I looked closer, I realized I recognized nearly all of them. A suspicion formed in my mind, and I quickly pulled out my phone. Scrolling through my business records, I confirmed what I had begun to suspect. This was my event. A few months ago, my business partner and I had acquired a smaller catering company as part of our expansion. The former owner had stayed on as a manager, handling bookings made before the acquisition. That meant that, technically, this wedding's contract had been signed before we took over. But as of now, everything was legally under my control. My father and stepmother had no idea that the same embarrassment they had just mocked owned the company serving their high-class wedding guests. I called my operations manager to confirm. "Hey, the catering team at the Lakeview Estate wedding. Who booked that event?" After a short pause, he replied, "Oh yeah, that was from the acquisition. The contract carried over." "Why?" I let out a slow breath, then said the words that would turn the night upside down. "Pull them out. Now!" Within minutes, my staff had begun packing up everything. The food, the equipment, even the tables and linens. I didn't need to explain myself. They trusted me, and the contract had a clause that allowed us to terminate service if there was hostility or discrimination against our staff or ownership. My father's behavior had just given me the perfect legal reason to enforce it. I stood near the parking lot as the catering trucks loaded up and drove away, leaving 300 wedding guests with no dinner. My father wanted me gone? Fine. But he wasn't getting my services either. Within minutes, my team executed my order flawlessly. Plates were cleared, chafing dishes were packed up, and tables were stripped of their neatly arranged place settings. My staff, well-trained and efficient, moved quickly and professionally, making it clear that they weren't leaving because of a mistake, but because they were instructed to. The guests, initially confused, started whispering as they noticed the food stations disappearing. The realization hit slowly. There would be no dinner. No entrees, no dessert, nothing but empty plates and growing frustration. The venue staff tried to calm the guests, but it wasn't long before voices started rising, demanding answers. My father, already drunk from the cocktail hour, staggered toward the catering team, shouting at them to get back to work. But by then, my lead chef had already handed the final order to the staff. Load up the trucks and leave. Stop this right now, my father bellowed, waving his arms in a drunken fury. You can't do this. The former owner of the catering company, now my manager, stepped forward, holding a printed copy of the contract. Sir, the contract you signed includes a clause allowing us to terminate services if any hostility is shown toward the staff or ownership. Given your actions tonight, we are fully within our rights to withdraw our services. My stepmother's face twisted in shock. This is his company? She shrieked, pointing at me. He did this? I stood calmly, watching the scene unfold. I had nothing more to say. Instead, I turned to the venue's event coordinator, handed her my business card, and said, if they have any complaints, tell them to contact my attorney. We're done here. With that, I walked out, leaving behind a wedding in chaos, 300 guests without food, an enraged father, and a stepmother who had just realized she had mocked the wrong person. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and angry texts from relatives who had clearly heard about what happened. Most of them were livid, accusing me of being spiteful and cruel for humiliating my own family. You ruined the most important day of your brother's life, one text from my aunt read. How could you do this to your own father? Another relative demanded. Among the tirade of insults, there was one message that stood out, the one from Mark. It was long, furious, and filled with accusations. I invited you because I thought we could fix things, but you proved Jenny right. You're selfish and only care about your pride. You embarrassed my wife and me in front of 300 people. I should have never reached out to you. You ruined my wedding. That one stung a little. I had hoped that, despite everything, Mark might see the bigger picture. But it was clear that Jenny still had her claws in him. Then came my father's message, shorter but no less threatening. You're going to regret this. I'll see you in court. Without hesitation, I forwarded everything to my attorney, who assured me that we had nothing to worry about. The contract was airtight, and their threats were just empty rage. With that, I blocked my father and stepmother's numbers, along with any other relatives who were sending me vitriol. But not everyone was against me. A handful of guests from the wedding reached out privately, offering words of support. Some had witnessed firsthand how my father and Jenny had treated me that night and were appalled. I don't blame you at all. The way they spoke to you was disgusting, one of Mark's friends wrote. Honestly, they had this coming. You just gave them what they deserved, another message read. Word started spreading beyond the family. My father and Jenny had always maintained a polished, respectable image in their social circles. But now, with whispers of what happened at the wedding, their reputation was cracking. I wasn't sure how far the damage would go, but one thing was certain. This time, they had no one to blame but themselves that I expected. My father and Jenny didn't let it go. A few days after the wedding disaster, I received a formal legal notice from their lawyer, demanding a full refund for the catering service. Their claim? That I had intentionally sabotaged the event and caused irreparable damage to their reputation. They even hinted at suing for additional damages, claiming the ruined reception had caused them extreme emotional distress. I wasn't surprised. Jenny was the type to escalate things when she didn't get her way, and my father was too stubborn to back down. I immediately consulted my attorney, who was already prepared for this. After reviewing the contract once again, he confirmed what we already knew. We were completely in the clear. The signed agreement explicitly stated that we had the right to terminate services if any hostile or discriminatory behavior was directed at our staff or ownership, which is exactly what happened. Rather than engaging in a dragged-out legal battle, my attorney suggested a settlement offer. I would refund 50% of the deposit, covering only the portion of services that had not been provided. In exchange, they would have to sign a legally binding non-disclosure agreement, NDA, preventing them from publicly discussing the incident or leaving negative reviews about my business. They would also waive all future claims and agree not to pursue any further legal action against me or my company. We sent the proposal through my attorney, knowing they had very little leverage. A week passed with no response, but then, finally, my father's lawyer got back to us. They accepted the terms. Just like that, the legal drama was over. It was clear they weren't happy about it, but they must have realized that dragging this in a court would only cost them more time and money. And while I was more than willing to fight them if needed, I was also glad to put the situation behind me. With the settlement signed and the NDA in place, my father and Jenny were effectively silenced. There would be no more threats, no more lawsuits, just the cold, hard reality that they had brought this upon themselves. Just when I thought the situation was finally behind me, Jenny decided to take things to another level. Within days of finalizing the legal settlement, I started noticing a wave of negative reviews appearing on my catering company's online profiles. They were clearly fake, suspiciously vague one-star ratings with comments like "unprofessional company," "ruined my event," or "owner is rude and unreliable, would never recommend." At first, I tried to ignore it, but then my business partner started reaching out. A few of my vendors and clients informed me that someone, a woman matching Jenny's description, had been calling them, trying to discredit me. She was spreading blatant lies, claiming I had a history of sabotaging events and mistreating clients. One of my longtime partners, a venue owner, even forwarded me an email from Jenny in which she falsely accused me of stealing money from clients and abandoning catering jobs last minute. She was trying to ruin my reputation and scare off future business. That was the final straw. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who wasted no time in drafting a cease and desist letter. The letter formally demanded that Jenny remove all defamatory reviews and stop spreading false claims, cease contacting my business partners, or face legal consequences. Understand that any further attempts to damage my business would result in a defamation lawsuit. We had proof of her actions, the email she sent, the fake reviews tied to her accounts, and even statements from my partners willing to testify if necessary. If she pushed any further, she would be the one facing serious legal trouble. The letter was sent via both email and certified mail, ensuring she received it. Now, it was only a matter of time before she realized that she had gone too far. That a few weeks after the wedding fiasco, I received an unexpected message, but this time, it wasn't another insult or legal threat. It was from my brother's wife, Emily. She apologized for everything that had happened and told me that she was deeply ashamed of how the family had treated me. Apparently, she had no idea about the full extent of the situation until after the wedding. She had always assumed that the estrangement between me and my father was just a misunderstanding or a personal choice, not something fueled by years of favoritism and mistreatment. She also revealed something surprising. She and Mark had their first major fight as a married couple right after the wedding. She was furious that Mark hadn't defended me when our father and Jenny humiliated me in front of the guests. She told him, in no uncertain terms, that his silence was just as bad as their insults. She couldn't believe that he stood by and let them degrade his own brother, someone who had come to the wedding in good faith, hoping to rebuild their bond. The argument escalated to the point that they decided to postpone their honeymoon to figure things out. Emily told Mark that she wouldn't tolerate the same toxicity that had ruined my relationship with my father and Jenny. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, Mark finally started to see things for what they were. He had always been close to Jenny, but after seeing her true colors at the wedding and hearing his wife's perspective, he began to question everything. For the first time in his life, he started distancing himself from Jenny. He stopped answering her calls as often and began reflecting on the years of manipulation. It took public humiliation, a ruined wedding, and nearly losing his wife, but Mark was finally waking up that a few weeks after our last conversation. Mark finally reached out to me directly. This time, there were no accusations, no passive-aggressive remarks, just a genuine apology. He admitted that he had been blind to how our father and Jenny had treated me all these years. He told me that after serious arguments with Emily and reflecting on everything that had happened, he finally saw the reality of our family dynamics. He regretted not standing up for me at the wedding and said he wished he had realized the truth sooner. Mark and Emily had started attending family therapy to help him work through the manipulative grip Jenny had on his life. According to him, it was eye-opening. The therapist helped him recognize how much of his thinking had been shaped by Jenny's influence. He realized that much of what he believed about me had been twisted by her narrative. As part of their new beginning, they decided to move out of the home Jenny had ties to. They found their own place, free from her influence, and Mark told me he was committed to setting boundaries with her and our father. I told him that I was genuinely happy for him. He was finally breaking free, finally taking control of his own life. But as for me, I wasn't interested in reconnecting with our father or Jenny. That door was closed. Mark understood. He didn't pressure me, and for that I was grateful. As for my business, things had never been better. The entire ordeal had actually worked in my favor. Many people in the industry admired how my team handled the wedding chaos professionally, and I had new clients reaching out because of it. My company's reputation had only grown stronger. Looking back, I had no regrets. Setting boundaries had been the best decision I ever made. For years, I had let my family dictate my worth, but not anymore. I had built something for myself. I stood up for myself. And in the end, that's what truly mattered.